This is a lecture for topic 9 on public opinion, and in this lecture we're going to be taking a look at the difference between conservatism and liberalism. If I were to ask you to name a famous liberal in the United States or a famous conservative, you could probably come up with an example for each. On the left-hand side of the slide are some examples of famous liberals. You have AOC, otherwise known as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, representative from the state of New York, Senator Cory Booker from New Jersey, and the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. And on the right-hand side of the slide, you see some famous conservatives. Sean Hannity from Fox News, Nikki Haley, the former UN ambassador and governor of South Carolina, and the late Senator John McCain. But while you might be able to identify a liberal or conservative, you might be asking yourself, well, really, what is the difference between liberals and conservatives? And that's what we're going to look at in this lecture today. So, what is a political ideology? Well, liberalism and conservatism are both examples of political ideology, but how is ideology defined? Political ideology is a set of underlying orientation, ideas, and beliefs. Another way of thinking about ideology is when you have a set of personal values that form a consistent set of beliefs or philosophy about government and the role that government should play in our lives. Liberalism and conservatism are the two main political ideologies in the United States today. Now, keep in mind that an ideology is associated with, but is not synonymous with, partisanship. In other words, that because a person is a liberal, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are a Democrat. And just because a person is conservative doesn't mean that they are a Republican. A person could be liberal, but they could be a member of the Green Party. A person could be conservative and they could be a member of the Libertarian Party. So make sure that you differentiate between ideology and party identification. And so one may be conservative or liberal, no matter what party happens to exist in a given country or at a point in time. So, what are the values, assumptions, and beliefs that underpin conservatism and liberalism? Well, to help us answer that question, we're going to take a look at three different categories of beliefs. Beliefs that people have about human nature, beliefs that people have about the proper role of government, and beliefs about what kind of economic system is the best sort of economic system. And as we first, we're going to define what these human nature, role of government, and economic systems, what those words mean. And then next, we're going to look at how the values of conservatives and the values of liberals regarding these three features are fundamentally different. All right, so let's define each of these categories that we were talking about on the previous slide. When we talk about human nature, what are we talking about? Well, human nature are the traits and behaviors that humans naturally possess, sort of innate characteristics, things that we are born with, that all humans are born with. When we talk about the proper role of government, we're basically making a normative assertion of the role that government should play in our society. So, like saying something like government should be very limited and not be involved in our lives, or that government should be very active and actively involved in our lives. Those are some examples of the belief about the role that government should play in our society. And then an economic system is the means by which resources, services, and goods are distributed in a society. And there are different beliefs about what the best way to distribute those resources are. Should they be distributed via a free marketplace, or should the government be in control of distributing those goods? And so that just gives you a basic sort of understanding of these different categories. And now let's take a look at how liberals and conservatives differ in the way that they answer these sorts of questions. Okay, so when it comes to conservatives, what do they believe about human nature? When it comes to human nature, conservatives are realists. What does that mean? Well, conservatives think that, like, remember earlier we talked about Thomas Hobbes, and the idea that if you are in the state of nature and there's no government, that humans are going to be sort of looking out for themselves. They're doing whatever it takes to keep themselves alive, to keep their family alive. Okay. And so Thomas Hobbes was a realist and sort of from the conservative tradition. The conservatives kind of embrace that. They can see the good in people, but they also know that people are often not governed by reason, but passion, and that they're also looking out more for themselves and their family rather than looking out and being concerned with the greater good. Not that they don't care about the greater good, but when push comes to shove, humans are programmed innately to sort of look out for their own self survival. They also think that human nature is sort of fixed. I mean, of course, human nature is innate. This is the way that we're born. But conservatives think that the way we're born sort of runs deep, right? That they do see that there are natural differences between, say, men and women, because it's just a part of our innate biology. And so conservatives are more likely to see human nature as fixed and therefore sort of hard to change. So if government tries to change people, they're going to run up into some difficulty because of some assumptions that conservatives make about human nature. Conservatives also think that since humans are sort of innately crafted in a certain way, that the things that we've done for a long period of time, certain traditional ways of living, the conservatives are more likely to sort of embrace those traditions. That there's something important about when you see humans engaging in the same behaviors over and over. There's something about those to be celebrated and preserved. And so, that is sort of builds off of the sense that human nature is somewhat fixed. Um, Conservatives think that that humans naturally love liberty, that we naturally want to be free. And so there's something about the human that's always seeking out freedom, being able to make choices for themselves, living in a life that's sort of not interfered with. Okay. But because they also think that humans are sort of self-interested and governed by passion and not reason, that uh, humans love liberty, but if that liberty goes unchecked, that it can cause harm. Okay. And then finally, that humans are autonomous, that they like to make decisions for themselves. They do make decisions for themselves. And ultimately, humans are responsible for their own choices. That humans aren't sort of shaped and formed by the conditions that they live in, but that all humans have a sense of autonomy and they make their own choices, and that they ultimately own the choices that they make. Liberals have a different take on human nature. While conservatives are more realist, liberals are more idealistic when it comes to human nature. They see that they do accept that humans are self interested, like conservatives, but they also think that humans are able to put cooperation and reason first, particularly if they're encouraged to do it. And that relates to the belief that liberals have that people are not as fixed at birth as conservatives think that they are. And so while conservatives view innate traits as running really deep, liberals see people as not as fixed at birth, and that society plays a role in shaping who we are and who we become. And so liberals see human nature as more malleable. And as such, they think that change for humans is possible. And so a liberal, when it comes to human nature, might see that somebody who is making bad choices, they're more likely to ask what role society plays in shaping that individual and that maybe it's something about the environment that they live in that is shaping them to make bad choices. And so they also think that if you change the environmental conditions, if you change society, that we actually can produce people who make better choices. So liberals are more idealistic in that way, as they think that human nature can be shaped by society for better and for worse. Liberals, when it comes to human nature, see the capacity for change as something that's positive, something that's good. So usually liberals, when it comes to sort of human history, they see change moving in a progressive a trajectory. And therefore, humans are a lot less likely or a lot more likely to question tradition and status quo. So remember with the conservatives, when it came to human nature, they were more like the way humans have already always done it is sort of the best way of doing it. Liberals are more suspect of tradition, and they see that change is moves us in a progressive direction, and therefore they're more likely to question tradition and status quo. Now, when it comes to conservatism, liberalism, and the proper role of government, it's the assumptions about human nature that liberals and conservatives have that really influence the role that government should play in society. And so, if you have an assumption that your attitude towards human nature is more realistic, then the role you think government should play in our society is going to be different than if you have a more positive or idealistic view of human nature. For conservative, the less government there is, the better. Conservatives don't want government involved in all aspects of our life. They don't see government as the solver of all problems. It shouldn't play that role. In fact, conservatives are more likely to let private entities, such as private corporations or families and society, churches maybe, that they should be helping solve the problems within our society, that we shouldn't turn to government to fix everything. Um, so, in many ways, conservatives think that the main role of government is to enhance liberty. And so, humans are liberty loving, and so we should sort of let humans make the decisions that they want to make, and that government should stand out of the way in order to let there be sort of free competition among individuals and let individuals make the choices that they want to make. And the individuals that make good choices are going to thrive, and individuals that make less than good choices maybe are not going to thrive in that society. However, we do know that conservatives think that liberty can be abused. Remember that humans are fundamentally self interested, they're governed by passion, not reason, and that's relatively fixed in nature from a conservative perspective. So when government does involved, it's usually to serve as a check on human nature, when sort of human nature is likely to maybe harm other people in the society. And so, where conservatives think government should get involved is keeping order and security. And that's why you're going to see conservatives supporting of a stronger police force, a stronger criminal justice system, and also a strong military as well, because they sort of see that in liberty can people acting free can sometimes harm others, and that's where government should step in. They also think that government should promote tradition and traditional values. And so, where government should get involved is to provide some support for the traditional way that we have done things, whether that's the traditional family or the role that religion has traditionally played in the United States political culture. Conservatives are going to be more comfortable with government getting involved in at least giving some support for those traditions. Liberals have a different take on the proper role of government. Liberals see government as a positive force in society. They think that government should be there to be actively involved, particularly when it comes to correcting societal wrongs. And so that if, from a liberal perspective, when it comes to discrimination, inequality, environmental damage, just as a few examples, that the government has a responsibility to address, to prevent discrimination, to get actively involved in that. To if we see inequalities, whether it's educational inequalities or economic inequalities, that the government should get involved to sort of remedy those kinds of inequalities. And so liberals are much more comfortable with government getting involved more actively in our lives because they see government as a positive force. They also think that because humans are not fixed in nature, that government can play a role in helping people change for the positive. So that if humans are a product of their conditions, government can come in and either support conditions that produce good individuals, such as support education, support job training, right, in order to give people the tools that they need to improve their lives. But also, they'd be more comfortable with when we see conditions that are resulting in negative human actions and behaviors, such as the prevalence of poverty or the prevalence of crime within a neighborhood. They might want to go in and improve economic conditions because they think that better economic conditions, better educational conditions are going to lead to more positive outcomes. Now, from a liberal perspective, government shouldn't intervene in all matters. And in particular, the liberals have a strong belief that you have a right to privacy. And so the decisions that you make regarding your body, whether you want to have an abortion or whether you want to use contraceptives, the decisions you make about who you want to marry, the decisions you might want to make about ending your life or the drugs that you take or those sorts of things, liberals are much more likely to say that that's an area where government should not get involved. The last thing we're going to look at is economic systems and the difference between conservatives and liberals when it comes to what the best economic system is. Well, to be clear, both conservatives and liberals are capitalists, and they both support regulated capitalism. Neither conservatives nor liberals embrace a fully free, laissez faire, let it be market capitalism. Okay? And so they both support capitalism, but they both think that it should be regulated to a certain degree. The big difference revolves around how much regulation should be involved in the marketplace. So let's look at those differences. So when it comes to the economic system, conservatives support regulated capitalism, but the less regulations in the marketplace, the better. Okay. And so they don't think that the marketplace should have absolutely no regulations. Conservatives support minimum wage laws. Conservatives support workplace safety laws. Conservatives don't think that corporations can pollute, spew pollutants into the air, freely, right? But they really think that the less regulations you put in the market, the better. And so conservatives sort of tilt towards laissez faire because they feel that that works with human nature. And so rather than having the government tell and regulate the economic environment, set prices, set really strict regulations. From a conservative, they're like, let the marketplace work, right? If you're a corporation and you're spewing a bunch of, harmful chemicals into the environment, the consumers are going to know about that, and then they're not going to purchase things that your corporation makes. So they have a lot more faith in the ability of people to make choices on the marketplace without like a lot of interference from the government. Another economic attitude or belief that is sort of related to the economic system of choice is the idea that we should let individuals make their own choices on the marketplace within reason, right? And that's because that the choices that you make economically, that those should be left to flourish and not the government shouldn't interfere with that. And so for conservatives, personal wealth is mostly a reflection of individual traits, not social conditions. The harder you work, the more money you're going to make. The more you dedicate yourself to getting an education that's going to lead to a better job, you're going to make more money, right? If you don't work hard and you don't, apply yourself in terms of education, you're not going to make as much money. And the government shouldn't be there to sort of redistribute wealth to, give a benefit to somebody who didn't work really hard. Liberals, on the other hand, support more regulation in the marketplace. They see that an unregulated market can be really damaging. And when an unregulated market is damaging, the government needs to step in order to remedy that damage. And so liberals are regulated with a tilt towards redistributing wealth, and also a tilt towards preventing greater harm, and that they see the government has a positive place for interfering with that. Also, that because liberals have a different attitude about human nature, that humans are a product of their environment, that they don't think that personal wealth is always a reflection of individual habits and traits. It can be, but societal factors also play a role. And so liberals are much more willing to recognize that there's systemic racism, and that systemic racism can basically create an uneven playing field when it comes to education and when it comes to accumulation of wealth. And so they'd be more likely for government to address that systemic racism in order to create better conditions for the economy. They also think that that the system can be sort of rigged in order to favor the wealthy. They would be critical of tax laws that give breaks to those who already have wealth in order to trickle that wealth down. They see that more as propping up and reinforcing wealth and making it more difficult for certain individuals who aren't as wealthy to get ahead. All right, keep these in mind as you're reading the textbook and you get a broader sort of understanding of the values and beliefs that underpin liberalism and conservatism.